Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Text to Table. We are closing out the end of the year and the Fab Four. We are back together again, y'all. All four of us in one episode.
Hey.
We got mugs.
we are sporting the mugs.
We got some logo merchandise now.
Okay. Y'all want one?
All right, y'all. It's December.
I know. I can't believe it.
Let me just say it again. It's December.
My
we have
birthday
made
month.
it to 2020. Can we just toast to making it to 2020?
Listen,
Amen. Cheers.
Everybody, please.
Cheers.
It's
all
good
right, and what we're gonna do?
Feels like it's been forever since the four of us have been on the screen together.
It has.
It is.
Yeah.
It has been forever, and we're about to make this. We're gonna do a little bit differently because we're gonna hit on all the major things of 2020. We're gonna touch on politics. We're gonna touch on injustice, and we're gonna touch on the pandemic. All in this episode. So, starting with politics, and we have a lot of texts because, Shawn, to your point, this is it's been a couple of months since the four of us have been together, but we've been texting the table.
Mm-hmm.
Donté, you were texting Shawn in November, right? Or we all were trying to text Shawn in November. And Donté, what was your response from Shawn?
he was not having it. I was considered a CNN special correspondent for the election. I had friends who weren't watching the election, and I kept texting Shawn like, "He's up in Pennsylvania. This is happening in this." And Shawn was like, "Please stop texting." Like, nope, thank you, but I'm establishing these boundaries right here.
You know, it was about protecting my energy, and I remember the feeling from the 2016 election. And I just made a very conscious decision that in order for me to be in a good place and I did my part. I voted and encouraged others to vote. And I was optimistic. However, I didn't want that negativity in my space. I didn't want it in my spirit. So I blacked out, no social media, no texting, no calls, no nothing from family, friends, no news. And while it was difficult, I needed to just be in a zone. And I just listened to music and totally used that time to just, kind of make the best of I did my part. And I'm glad I did it, and I remember I slept well that night. I woke up the next morning and looked at my phone and started seeing the results and, kind of the interesting situation that this country found itself in without having a clear winner. The part that was more disheartening, though, was the number of people that voted for the current administration.
I actually was in a better position because you all know, live in Chicago. I'm a Bears fan. The Bears always let you down. And I legit went into this election like I'm going to hope for the best, expect the worst based on my personal, candidates that I was trying to support. And I really just went with whatever was going to happen. And it just didn't faze me because I've not let the Bears steal my joy. So I was like, I was not going to let this steal my joy either. It's 2020. It is what it is. And it really was a good deflection because, to your point, Shawn, 2016, I didn't want that feeling again. Mm-hmm. So I put a wall up. My wall was a little bit different in that I was more along the lines of just being like, it is what it is versus unplugging. But it helps with the anxiety level. I'll definitely say that.
Okay, Michelle, I'm gonna have a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and because I haven't really formally told you this, but one of our text exchange, we were talking about what we all were doing, at our organizations during the elections. I think a lot of people have been thinking about, okay, if you're what should you do with your teams? It's a stressful time for a lot of people. Mm-hmm. And so I know when we were texting, you, I think, did a magic show.
Yeah. The election
on
deflection.
Election day?
Election deflection happy hour. Yeah.
I love that.
Okay, so let me be honest. I'm undecided on how I felt about it. Not that you asked, but I'm a little undecided I was a little conflicted on how I felt about it because, I mean, to the points we just raised earlier, this is a stressful time for a lot of people, and it's a lot going on. So, I guess, was there a concern that might have seemed out of touch a little bit to the moment, I should say?
No.
Okay.
I'll say this. It wasn't even planned. Like I told y'all I had the Bears mentality going. So I was straight. When I woke up, I was like, it's election day. I already voted. I'm about to wear I wore my sweatshirt. That's the name one candidate. Whatever. And I vote stickers and stuff. I was in a good space. But the team, I remember we had a meeting maybe that week or the week prior, the end of the week, where there was a lot of anxiety. And there was a lot of election anxiety and a lot of that feelings. And people were, telling me like in one-on-one meetings that they were stressed about the election. And I felt it insensitive to be like, you're saying it's all good. Did you vote? Okay, cool. And we talked about that, making sure people went to vote, make sure people knew they had time to go vote. But that stress, I think, is real. And again, I remember how I felt in 2016, the days after, how defeating that was. And so what I wanted to do, I literally woke up in a great mood and was like, I don't think everybody else is in a great mood right now. And I think it's a little insensitive to go to work and ask people to pound away because I know that a lot of them are anxious. So you know what? We can't do nothing about it now. So let's get our minds off it. And I remember waking up thinking, what can we do? I'll just do a happy hour. Okay, we always do happy hours. No one's going to come to that. What else can we do? I'm like, I'm a hire magician. Random as hell. Like I just in my
head, that was literally your thought. I'm gonna hire a magician.
Literally, I was like, I'm about to hire a magician. And I Googled at 7 a.m. virtual Zoom magician. And the first name that popped up was some dude out in California. And he had a little info form. I filled out the form. I said, hey, I'm seeing it. Are you free today?
Wait, all of this was today? You did that same day? I don't know.
Yeah, like 8:30 in the morning. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's what I'm playing. So I put that in there. I'm like, you free, blah, blah, blah. I sent an email out to the team. So we're going to have a happy hour with a magician. It's probably going to be lame. I can't tell you if it's good or not. I have no idea who this person is. He probably just stole my money, but we're about to do it. And we did, and what was really cool is that my nephew, my 10-year-old nephew, is so into magic. And I text my brother and sister-in-law, said, hey, I'm doing a magic show. Does he want to come? And he came on and he got on with the magician ahead of time and did a little trick with him. And then he did a trick with the whole team. Once everyone was on, he did some tricks at the end. He participated. But that meant so much for him. Mm-hmm. As a 10-year-old, being involved in this, having something different than virtual school, which has been hard. The next day, he told his class how he was the opening act. The card team put together a little swag bag for him. We mailed it to him as a thank you. And really, it was seeing the joy on his face that really lifted a lot of people. And so you can go through the whole bandit of, we're doing this because of election day and we're doing this to give people, a deflection. And my brother did name that election deflection. But seeing a child that can't go vote, right, mm-hmm. knows what's going on, very clear about what's happening. Their household is very involved. But this is an opportunity for him to connect and take our minds off something and give him some joy while giving it back to us. So, it was definitely a little lame, but everybody loved it. And it was a chance to just unplug and forget about, laugh, have a drink with each other and just breathe.
And that's what I love about it, because that was an unintended benefit.
Yeah.
You doing it. I mean, you probably, at the time, you may not have been thinking about your nephew as you were planning it, but the fact that he got something out of it and, seeing the joy on his face, that in itself made it worth it. Yeah, it really did. It was really special. And that's me. I do random stuff like that.
Hey, hold on. I'm gonna throw you a curveball though.
You just want to play a magic show. That's all.
I'm gonna throw you a curveball with your magic show.
Okay.
If you were white, do you think that would have had the same resonance with your team?
I think it's because I'm Michelle, not because I'm Black, not if I was white, not if I was Latina, not if I was a man. It's because that's how I am. Like, I'm silly at heart. I am definitely have a silly speak to me, and I definitely like to break the ice. Like we'll go into these staff meetings and I'll probably crack the first joke to get everybody to just chill out a little bit. So I don't think it matters what color. I think it matters who I am. Like if I was somebody that never did anything like that, and then I just came in like, you guys, there's an election, let's have a magic show. It'd have
been totally weird.
But because that's who I am, and I've thrown random, surprise happy hours with random, not as lame as this, but I think because of who I am, it was authentic. So I think that's the key. If it wasn't authentic and something that you would typically do, and it wasn't done out of really caring about the team, then maybe it could be viewed that way. But I don't think it would have mattered what color you want. It's really about who you are and what do you bring to the office every day. And that's part. I don't bring magic shows every day. That kind of vibe I think I bring all the time.
All right. So we have a president for next 4 years. 2021, I'll give you a minute to think. What are your predictions I would say at the intersection of like leadership and politics? And I will start, and you know how you ask a question and you're like, well, I ain't got to answer my own damn question. No, I think walls are breaking down, and I think some of the I think my prediction is some of the taboo-ness of even this podcast and the show of like race and politics. I think we're going to start to break that down more. I think it's important for me, not only as a person but a Black person in leadership, not to tell anybody what to vote for or to make anything biased or objective. Again, I'll reiterate the point. My identity is not up for polarization. That's why I'm speaking out.
Yes.
Yeah. Is that a t-shirt? That's a t-shirt.
Like, you can't polarize my identity. Like
right?
That's why I'm speaking.
That's the other side of the mug.
Okay.
Tell that.
Yes.
That's a shirt. I think I know mine. I know it. There's a Black woman in the White House, our vice president elect. And there was a Black woman there 4 years ago as the first lady. But having a vice president in the White House, I think where I see next year coming to be is the importance of Black women. You hear that narrative. I kind of hear it and just kind of rolls off my back. It's like, sure. But I'm starting to understand it in a new light and what that really means. And it's just such a powerful portrayal of not just Kamala Harris, but also, Stacey Abrams and the countless other women that were integral to this election. And so I really think that we're going to start to pay close attention to the role that Black women really do play and what that means, to lead and be of that race and gender. I think it's going to be pretty exciting. And I definitely feel, I said this in a Facebook post, as like, I feel seen and I feel heard. And I wrote that, but I really, really meant it this time. It really meant something.
I think for me, 2021 means a renewed inspiration, even as like the people on the administration are being announced. Like, I just feel like this new fire within me to kind of keep going, right? And to keep being a Black leader, in association management, to continue being a Black CEO. I have to admit, like, there were times in 2020 when I was like, you know what, I'm tired. I don't know if I want to be a CEO no more. Like, because it was just so much happening and so much to try to take on and deal with, in addition to what was happening in our society. But now I feel like, yes, like with every announcement of the transition team, with, the Black men I'm seeing in Biden's, administration, and the Black women, and just how diverse also like of these people he's putting in to his administration. I'm just like, okay, I'm back. Like, yeah, like I see, as Michelle said, I see everybody else too, like just the diversity that he's bringing. And then shout out to also, Biden Harris for naming an all women communications team. I was like, Biden knows what's up. Like, he knows what's up for real. So
For me, 2021 is about renewed inspiration.
Well, I will close us out with my thoughts, and I'll just say, for me, 2021 is not necessarily about the outcome of the election, because it wasn't a silver bullet solution to the issues and the challenges that we have in this country. And I think everything happens for a reason. And if you think about the pandemic, racism, and everything else that, I mean, there was some ugliness that was, unveiled this year. And I think most people have been impacted in some significant way. And let's be reflective, but at the same time, recognize that the work isn't done. And I hope, for white people especially, the work has to continue, the reading, the researching, and understanding the many, 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 many years of injustices against Black people. We've got to stay focused on that. So 2021 is an opportunity to, I would say, ramp it up even more and recognize, okay, what did we learn from everything that happened this year? And dig deep and figure out how are you going to use what you learned to continue to fuel everything that needs to happen in 2021 and beyond.
I love it. And we're just getting started. If y'all heard all them ping and dings in the background, we got people in the waiting room, so we're gonna let them in. Joining us at the table, we have, let me get it correct, Dr. Eva Pietri. And even though it'll be formal, we'll call you Eva from now on, but I just want to make sure the doctor is correct.
Doctor.
Welcome to the table, Eva.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for having me.
So, Eva, we are reflecting on 2020. Definitely, you can't talk about 2020 without talking about the pandemic. And we actually were texting about you because your research actually that you did earlier this year, and I think it's still continuing. This was featured in Associations Now, and we all have affiliations with ASAE. We saw an article, and what was really interesting, particularly for the Text to Table community, where we focus on the intersection of race and leadership, was you actually focused on messaging that people were doing during the pandemic. And we can all remember, we're all in this together. And you remember the commercials, like the somber, like, all that, the music that would play. But for organizations, a lot of leaders were saying, we're all in this together, and we were doing all of this like team spirit and let's make it through. And what was really fascinating, what we kind of talked about in our text about your research, was that the race of who was delivering that message matters about we're all in this together, because we actually aren't, right?
Yeah, so we were interested in this question because we had heard that messaging, we're all in this together. So my collaborator, Dr. India Johnson, who's a professor at Butler, so I always like to mention her because basically we collaborate on everything together. We were talking about, it was in April that we decided to conduct this study. And we were just thinking, okay, we keep hearing this messaging. We've done a lot of work looking at who suggests to Black women specifically that they'll belong or feel comfortable or feel like they can trust their colleagues in an organization. And we've typically found that a white woman leader isn't really helpful for Black women. And because we kept hearing all this messaging, like we're all in this together, we're all dealing with this really difficult time, we thought, well, maybe if a white woman leader said, hey, we're all in this together, I'm dealing with a really difficult time too, I'm really worried about my family, this is really isolating, because remember in April, that was when we all sort of went into isolation, or we were all social distancing. So we're like, okay, maybe this would be a useful way to help make a white woman leader more relatable or likable, basically relatable to Black women. And so to look at this, we had a leader say, we're all in this together, I'm really sort of struggling, I'm sure you're struggling, just like know that I'm here for you. Or had the leader basically say, I'm here for you, but not I'm struggling. And then we also manipulated or had the leader either be a Black woman or a white woman. And we looked at this among Black women. So I think really an interesting thing about this work is like the context of when everything is happening is really fundamental. So like when we started to look at this question, we started to think about it in April, and then really soon after we launched the study, a lot of information unsurprisingly came out about the disparities in how COVID-19 was affecting different communities. And so then we found out, okay, so a white woman might be struggling, but we know that this is really disproportionately affecting Black and brown communities. And so we initially thought it would be helpful. I just want to be like completely honest. We initially thought, like, hey, maybe this will be helpful for a white woman to say. It turns out it was not, and it was like the exact opposite of helpful. So when a Black woman delivered the message, it actually was helpful. Like, they could relate to her more. They felt like she was understanding the realities of COVID-19 in the same way as them. And they also just like wanted to work at her company. So it was all good things. But when the white woman leader said this, it was basically the opposite. And they didn't want to work at her company when she said that. So having her deliver that "we're all in this together" message had the like basically unintended, really negative consequences.
Eva, I want to go quickly back to the "we're in this together" statement.
Yeah.
You get around that, because what came to mind for me was the economic impact, and why it's hard for me to believe when white people say that they're sincere, because they're not economically impacted by this pandemic the way that people of color are either. It's not when just white people say that either. When I saw commercials on TV, about "we're in this together" too, I was just like, yeah, right, whatever. You're just you're in a bind because you want money, and so I felt, really a sense of, for me, that's where that insincerity feeling comes from. It's just like, well, yeah, we're in this together, but you still got internet, and there are privileges you're still afforded as a white person in this country, even during a pandemic, that Black people disproportionately are not afforded, during a pandemic, or are going to be suffering even more than they were before during the pandemic. So I wanted to just bring up that thought really quickly. I don't know about the rest of you guys, or if you felt that way too.
I guess, and that's part of my question back to Eva. I felt, as you raised this question, I feel that white women and whoever is saying it is sincere. I feel that as a Black woman or a person of color, period, we may zone in on it differently, because thinking like, oh, you don't know. And I think that's a little bit of projection in a sense, because we can be in it together from different angles. It's not all a financial angle. It's not all, we all struggle the same angle. Mental health along this time has been real. I think that's an area we all kind of match on. Anxiety around this time. And so I think when I hear it, I take it as sincerity for sure. You know what I mean? I just think it comes from a different space. Now I may, have an eye roll that it's not to the same level, kind of the same lines of when people are outraged by some sexist remarks over a racist remark. I'm usually like, okay, I'll deal with that, sword rather than the other one. But what is like does your research show that it is seen as authentic and real, or is it just a statement that's being made?
That's a really good question. And I don't think we can speak to it in this, like, I don't have the data to speak to that in this study. So yeah, thanks for inspiring me. I should look at that, the extent to which they just are perceiving it as inauthentic. So we had some open-ended questions where we just asked them their basic impressions. And I don't think that people weren't saying like, oh, we don't think she's really struggling, or we think she's just lying to, get people to like her or something. So I didn't really get that sense. But we were curious because it didn't really work. So either it was harmful or it didn't work. So we're like, well, what if she tries to be more of an ally and acknowledges the racial disparities? And that, when I looked at open-ended questions for that, that they started to question her sincerity. And that's when we started to see issues of like, we don't really think this is authentic.
Michelle, to what you were just actually saying, I actually do think that people did, not that they didn't think it's sincere, but to me, it's a lack of awareness where white people have the luxury to have race be optional to think about. Right. And like, even having statements of like, you were just making a point like, oh, well, this is not about race. Like, for anybody who's Black or a person of color, almost literally everything is about race. Like there's no setting where you do not think about your race. And I think that's what this year is about, is to say, no, that is a form of systemic power to have the option to be, abysmal of race and to have that sort of thing. So I think your research made me think about that, where it's not that I'm doubting the sincerity of it, but it's the lack of the awareness that race is a central factor in literally everything, right? And stop ignoring that point.
Yeah, and I think that's sort of what inspired the second study, is we're like, well, let's like have her just acknowledge it, but then that still came off. So it's interesting, which I think then led us to think, okay, it's not, for a white leader, it's not easy for them to do a statement that's going to come off as authentic. Like, you have to really get to know somebody, and through multiple interactions, really show that you are an ally. And it basically, we came to the conclusion that we're like, okay, like maybe it's just not, there's not a great statement that a white leader can have, and we just need to have more diversity in leaders. And that's like the real solution.
Yeah, and actually, can we repeat that again? Because I think when we were texting about that, I think one of the things when we were texting in our chat, I was telling to Donté and Michelle, I was saying, like, okay, so what is the, if you are sort of a white leader or something, like, what can you really say? And that statement, your response was just to reiterate your point.
Instead of like just figuring out the best way to make white individuals or white leaders allies, focus more on actually having the diversity and the representation.
Amen.
There's your TEDx talk right there.
Right.
And one of the things, I'll be interested to hear your response to this, but, the election has happened and we have the first Black woman vice president in this country. And back to representation matters and the significance of that and the inspiration that, and not just for women, but for, young kids of color across the spectrum, if you will. How impactful is that? And, breaking yet another, ceiling, if you will. And this is my tangent, but I find it fascinating. It's 2020 and we are still celebrating first.
Oh, yeah.
Whether it is, the first fill in the blank for whatever, it's amazing to me that we have come this far, but we're still celebrating first. So that's just my tangent. But the question is about, the election of the first Black woman vice president.
So I like that question a lot, because ironically, I just had a paper rejected on this exact question, but we're going to revise it and resubmit it somewhere else very soon, because I think it's really important. So we, after Vice President-elect Harris, Kamala Harris, dropped out of the Democratic primaries, I personally was really upset about it. My colleague India was really upset about it. And when I talked to people about it, they were like, well, there was a lot of controversy, a lot of narratives in the media surrounding like whether or not Black voters supported her. And so I had some people say, well, it doesn't really matter, like kind of like just not acknowledging the importance of her representation, particularly. So when we thought about it, we thought, she would be beneficial for white women, she would be beneficial for Black and Asian women, and as well as Black and Asian men. So we ran a study right after she dropped out of the Democratic primary, and we just measured the extent to which different racial and demographic groups felt excluded from politics and invisible in politics as a result of her dropping out. And we basically found like exactly what you'd expect with white women, white men, Black men, and Black women. White men were the least affected. White women then indicated feeling more invisible compared to white men after she dropped out. And then Black men more so than white women. And finally, Black women were the most harmed by her dropping out. And this was sort of a separate process than just supporting her politically. So it was like feeling seen and feeling like, hey, I'm being seen and I'm visible in politics was different than I completely support her policy. So it's not exactly like the same processes. But after conducting that study, I was thrilled when she was the presidential nominee. And then of course, cried when she, when I saw her speech and, just like you said, I mean, Shawn, like you said, the fact that we're still having first is sort of ridiculous. And the fact that we could not get, a a woman or a Black woman or a Black and biracial Asian woman as a nominee is also really frustrating as the actual presidential nominee. But I still think it's really powerful to see her in that role. And I definitely think that helped a lot of women, particularly women of color, feel seen and visible in politics in a way that they had absolutely not felt before.
Can I real quick jump in on that? It's funny because when she was running to be the Democratic nominee, I was kind of in my, boycott of watching politics at this point. So I wasn't paying a ton of attention to it because I didn't want to get attached to something that I thought was going to be, really, really not likely. But then when she became the vice presidential nominee, I was still in the same, I don't want to get attached. Mm-hmm. It wasn't until she got up there in that beautiful white suit, winter white, and gave her speech that I felt like I could let that wall down and get attached. And to your point, it was that feeling of being seen, being heard, being visible that I didn't even know I was missing until I heard her speak.
That'll be imprinted in my memory forever. It's like I still even kind of get chills thinking about it. So.
I neglected to mention that you're assistant professor in psychology at IUPUI School of Science. And a lot of your work, most of your more recent work, focuses on bias and promoting diversity in STEM. So if people wanted to find out more about your work, is there a place that people can learn more about you and your work?
So if they want to learn more, they can visit my lab's website. It's pretty easy. It's pietrilab.com. And so there, and that links also to my faculty page at IUPUI. So if you just search me, either my faculty page or my lab page will pop up. If you go to research, I talk more about different research projects, including the ones I talked about here today, but some other stuff as well.
Thank you. Well, thank you for joining us at the table. I think your research and the work that you're doing, showing what the work of bias is and how these conversations need to happen. So thank you for your work and thanks for joining us at the table.
Well, thank you so much for having me. This was really fun. I enjoyed chatting with you all.
All right, everybody, we have a guest to the table. Somebody that we have been texting about is Christina Swarns, who is the executive director, the new executive director of the Innocence Project. Yes. Welcome, Christina.
Welcome.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here at the table.
At the table. So I already told you in advance, this ain't a webinar.
At the table. I'm sitting down at the table.
This is somewhere in between, not a webinar, but we're not gonna go deep like red table talk. Like you're not gonna be crying. We're not gonna dig into your pad. We're not gonna.
Okay.
No entanglements.
Okay, so Christina, for people who may not be familiar with you, one of the things in your bio that is just extremely impressive is you are one of the few Black women who have argued at the Supreme Court.
Yes, I am.
And I know you've talked about this very extensively, but what is the sort of the quick and dirty version of that, if there is even such a thing, because I haven't argued in front of the Supreme Court. So I don't even know if you can make a quick and dirty version of that, but what is that version of that?
Yeah, I guess. Oh, thank you for asking. Yes, I think the first thing I want to say about that is, it's kind of crazy, right? There are so few Black women that argue in front of the Supreme Court today. Even when I argued, it was a to-do, and I think when I did it, I didn't realize, how unusual it was. So it was a surprise to me too. Anyway, that said, I represented a guy who was on death row in Texas, and he was represented by lawyers who introduced an expert who said that my client, his name was Dwayne Buck, was more likely to commit criminal acts of violence in the future. Here's the money shot, because he was Black. Period. That sentence ends right there.
And that was his client.
That was his own client, and this was an expert, an expert.
Wow.
A psychiatrist who testified. Now, the important point here is that in Texas, a finding of future dangerousness is like a prerequisite for a death sentence. So essentially, his own lawyers told the jury, he is eligible for and should be sentenced to death because he is Black. Period. Wow. Period. So it was a crazy case. And when I got into the case, I thought this is so crazy. Like, this isn't it. We'd be in here for a minute and we'll wrap this thing up because it was just so blatant, and we litigated that case for, I don't know, about 6 years, and we lost on that claim in every single court except the United States Supreme Court. Which should tell you something, right, about the state of the courts in this country, because all of these courts were good and ready to watch this man get executed behind that testimony. So,
I have so many questions, but I'm not gonna hog this. And I was with the guys earlier talking about how I've been all in the podcast and Netflix like everybody has for the quarantine time. And I'm listening to one podcast and watching one series on Netflix, and they're about the same thing. And one is Trial 4, which is about Shawn Ellis's case. And then the podcast I'm listening to is In the Dark with Curtis Flowers. Yeah. And I didn't intentionally listen to them at the same time. It was just, I started this podcast and then I turned on Netflix and this was on. But they're essentially the same story. And it's not new, because we know this happens. That's why you have a job, because this happens so often. But as I've been listening to this stuff, I've had to stop listening to it at night because it keeps me up. And then the stories blend and I can't keep track of who, because it's so similar. The patterns are so similar. And then I worry, I'm like, this could so easily be my husband, my brothers, you know what I mean? Anybody in my family, it could be me. And it's scary to think of, we're in 2020, and are the court systems, in your opinion, still really that messed up that this stuff can still happen?
Oh, one word answer. Yes, 100%. Not can it? It's happening every day. It's happening right now, between, the fact that poor people of color overwhelmingly rely on public defenders. Public defenders are overwhelmingly under-resourced, right? So it's a lopsided system. You have poor Black and brown people, going into these serious cases without enough without experienced lawyers, without investigative resources, without experts. It's just, there's no chance going in there. No, it's happening. It's happening right now. Since I started at the Innocence Project, and I've been in this seat for not even 3 months, we've brought 3 people home. We had a gentleman in Florida, did 37 years for a crime he didn't commit, rape, murder. And when he came out, which was amazing, of course, now he's not eligible for compensation under Florida's laws, because they say he had a prior conviction. He stole a bicycle. So that's in Florida at 18. So he went in at 18. So just like as a teenager, he stole a bicycle. And they say, now you are not eligible for compensation. That's Florida. New York, we just had one last week, a week and a half ago. Guy did 25 years on the testimony of an identification by a 10-year-old, like 200 yards away, or some crazy mess, and a jailhouse informant, like these cases are insane, and they keep going on. And like my office does the work of saying, this is the building blocks of a wrongful conviction, right? A bad ID, you have bad cops in your case. You have, a confession that doesn't make sense. You have a person with, mental health problems. You have all of these structures that we know contribute to wrongful convictions, but my office is literally battling it out state by state, not only to get people out, but to change the laws to make sure nobody goes in right this way. And I give you credit for watching the Boston case, because I tried to watch the documentary. I was like, I don't have it in me. I started watching. It's hard to watch.
It's hard to watch.
Really hard to watch.
Talk about the importance of voting and how elections have consequences. And, a lot of times people focus on the big election, voting for president of the United States, but all those local elections where you're electing DAs and stuff like that, like it trickles down, because those are the people who are setting the laws and enforcing the laws that impact Black and brown people. And certainly, I'm sure you've run into that quite a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, with respect to criminal justice, it's really local, right? That's 100% local politics, right? It's an elected DA in your town, like in my county, in your county, it's an elected politician. And as as we all know, these kind of local elections can be won or lost behind very small margins, right? And so, and really are responsive to the community. because they have to be, right? These are small town, in many instances, prosecutors making decisions that affect, lives of zillions of people. And I'll give you one example from the Dwayne Buck case, the litigation I took to the Supreme Court. That was in Houston, and in the early stages of the case, just on your point about elections and and I would say the power of community and the power of community voices and Black community voices. In the early stages after we took the case, the DA called us and said he was going to go to court and seek an execution date for Mr. Buck. And I was still at the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. So I used all my, LDF, razzmatazz and connections. I was like, you can't, I'm going to have to fly in, all the things. And he was not hearing a word I had to say. Nothing I said was going to stop this gentleman from seeking an execution date. So I fly in and I wind up connecting with a 80-year-old pastor in Harris County in Houston, named, who was the emeritus pastor of the Wheeler Avenue Baptist Church. And he brought another 80-year-old gentleman with him who was like the prior president of the NAACP, who brought another 80-year-old gentleman with him who was an 80-year-old, rabbi at a church. And then they all spoke on behalf of like the 80-year-old Archbishop of the Catholic Church. And they were like, we will go with you to the DA's office. And I thought, oh my, okay. I don't know how this is going to go. I was like, they didn't know anything about the case. Yeah. They didn't know anything about my client. They didn't know anything about me. I was like, but you got to get I was like, you need the facts. You know, fact sheet. Let me give you talking points. They were like, baby, we got this. And so we go, and they left us, the defense lawyers, we were left in the hallway. They were like, you stay here. And they went into the DA's office that, we couldn't get access to. And they came out, to make a long story short, after an hour, the judge is upstairs calling for us, like, why aren't you in court for this date setting hearing? The DA and counsel are all downstairs sequestered with these pastors. And they finally summoned me into the room with the elected DA, who turned him and said, I am not going to seek an execution date on the strength of the moral appeal that these gentlemen just brought into this room. And I'm here to tell you that now, we would not have made it to the Supreme Court but for that intervention that day, because he would have gotten an execution date set, and the case we relied on to get us to the Supreme Court hadn't come down. It came down afterwards. Mm-hmm. I tell that story all the time because that prosecutor understood in a way that I didn't, because I'm not from Houston, right? The weight and the power and the influence that these 4 80-year-old gentlemen brought with them. I brought nothing, right? I didn't have any electoral influence. I live in New York City. He's like, what are you going to do?
Right.
But these 4, right? Pastor Lawson, Howard Jefferson, Rabbi Karff, Archbishop Fiorenza, walked in the door with the weight of, of voters, of local voters, right, on their backs. And with that, it changed the case completely. So yes, it's about power and influence, like local power and influence, because criminal justice policy is local, 100%.
Christina, so Tech the Table was really founded at the intersection of race and leadership. And one of the things, and you've just enlightened me a lot to like the work the Innocence Project does. But part of our founding too was like who we were as people. With Tech to Table and being Black leaders at the intersection, because we kind of know we've been the spokesperson for our organization. So focusing a little bit on Christina, kind of in this next little thing that we talk about, I think I'm curious, you're 3 months in the Innocence Project. So you manage a 90+ person staff, and you decided to take a new job in the middle of a pandemic, and you're a Black woman, and it's COVID going on. Like, what were you thinking? Let's just walk me down that process.
Well,
I'm just like, ooh, child.
That just stressed me out.
What had happened was that,
right.
And you forgot, I'm a single mom, so I got a 12-year-old.
Oh, I didn't add that one. Okay, single mom too.
You.
Okay.
Woo! Bless you.
So, the truth of the matter is, this position, became available. And I thought, no, I just got to my job. I'm not taking this job. And then, as things go, right, smarter people reached out. Smarter people than me were like, what you doing? What are you talking about?
Mhm.
One of my very good friends who I worked with on the Dwayne Buck case in Texas is a Texas Harris County commissioner named Rodney Ellis, who was the chair of the board of the Innocence Project. Called me up. He was like, what are you doing right now? You have to actually apply for this job. I was like, no, you have to go ahead and apply for this job. So, I listened to grown folks. I was like, okay, all right. Like if somebody that was that important to me and I knew me, right? Like me, right? Said to me, you can't play with this. You actually have to be real and look at this. I said, okay. And then, so that's really what happened, but it was all pandemic. It was crazy. Like the first interview was just as it was breaking. So we had the good sense, we had it in person. I had the good sense to do that. It was just like, no, it was all, and then the rest of it was all virtual. So when I got the offer, I was like, am I out of my mind? I was like, I'm like, how am I gonna leave this organization in the middle of, it was like April. I just need you like in New York. It was crazy. I was like, either this is gonna be the best decision ever, or it is gonna be really bad. This is not the circumstances under which one would make a big life decision traditionally. But the opportunity to make real national reform, right, with the most high profile, most impactful criminal justice reform organization in the country, I was like, yeah, I'll do that.
There's never a perfect time.
I was just about to say that, Michelle.
Yeah,
I was like, even if you had not shared all that background with us, your story alone, I was like, she's the perfect person for this.
Yeah.
Like not even knowing you
Yes.
that way. I'm like, yeah, this is you. This has your name written on it.
The other people see, which sometimes, right, but you can't see yourself,
That's true.
right? And I will say, in the last weekend when I was finally making the decision, somebody else said to me, look, if your dreams don't scare you, you're not dreaming big enough.
Hey, now that's a word. Come on. Yes.
Drop.
Yeah.
I was like, all right, and sign me up. Sign me up.
Yeah.
So you've been there 90 days, the first 90 days.
And during the elections.
During,
Woo.
It was
have a lot.
A pandemic and the election. This is how I started my job.
Hey, how did you manage the elections? We were talking about that. How did you manage the elections with your team?
Yeah.
So we were bracing, like everybody else, we were bracing for not knowing, hoping for the best and praying that it wasn't like last time. And so we had a day after, like actually I called it the morning after because I didn't know what it was going to look like. I said, we're going to have a meeting the morning after. So that was it. Was it just come? There is no agenda. It is the morning after. And let's just, see where we are. And it was not the smoothest meeting, because it was such a hard morning still, because nobody knew what was going on. There was real reason for horror, right, at the election results.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Half of the country, as I started my meeting, voted in a way that makes me question, their view of my entitlement to access to this country, right? That's like real talk. That's what I feel like half of the country just called into question, my right to citizenship and access to the, full range that this country has to offer. So that's how I started it. I was like, I just want to be real about where I am right now, right? This morning, I said, this election has me considering my international options. Like this is real.
Very true.
Like, I don't know, right? Like, I don't know, like what happens on the flip side if he wins. I don't know, right? I have a kid. I don't know. And so it's hard, because we had, people who very much wanted to silver lining it, right? And people who did not want to hear about a silver lining because it was still too fresh and too raw, so it was a rough meeting, but we made it through.
You started, like you said, you had George Floyd, you had an election, you're brand new to a team of almost 100 or 100 plus. How do you, in 90 days, get to a place where you can go into a meeting, have that much of an authentic and real conversation? What did you do just as a leader to build that trust in the first 90 days? And did you have any reservations bringing yourself to that meeting in that way?
before I started, I had sent, the short answer is, I sent many questions, right? I sent a list of questions. Just tell me about yourself. Tell me what you think of the organization, blah, blah, blah. They all sent that back. And then sort of on day one.
To the entire team?
Yeah, everybody had to send me, all 90 of them had to send me a written answer to these, 10 questions. Because I just really wanted to, get a sense of A, who they were, and B, what they thought the priorities were. And so on day one, my first all staff meeting, I reflected it back. I was just like, this is what I heard you say, right? So I want you to understand, like when I set the priorities, you set the priorities. Like I didn't actually set them. Like you told me what the priorities are, and I'm going to now proceed from that place, right? I wanted us to, I consistently said, like, I want us to all be like on a level playing field where, we're all at the same starting point, right? So we all know where we are. There's not going to be confusion. There's not going to be like secrets, like, why is she doing that? We're like, I'm doing it because you told me to, that's what you told me in the thing, remember? The PowerPoint. And that's really how I have tried to proceed, right? Transparency is key, right? To be constantly, there's not a lot of secrets, right? I'm going to tell you what I'm doing, right? And I try really hard to just be who I am, right? At all times. I will say, that it is hard sometimes, right? And that morning, I had to sit for a minute and be, to be like, okay, all right, I'm just going to have to just own it and see what happens. This is my truth, right? And my truth is as valid as theirs. So I'm just going to tell it. And I know there's a lot of people in that room that share that truth. I've also done I have done more Zoom calls. I just committed. I was like, I'm doing one-on-ones with every human being that works for me. Mm-hmm. I will not. I was like, what you do, there will be a half an hour one-on-one. And you could, and through each one, it's like, we could talk about your cat. We could talk about sports. We could talk about, the weather, what you did this weekend, or we could talk about performance evaluations and we could talk, which you own this 30 minutes. And so for 3 months, I have had wall-to-wall Zoom meetings, but that was helpful because they got a chance to see me, because I'm just like this, right? I'm like, tell me what you want to tell me. I'm not, if you don't have anything, I'll just ask you questions because I have no shortage of questions. But otherwise, I let people, sort of control the conversation, and they get a chance to see me. And I'm easy, I tell them, like, I am easy, right? I am, right? I was not born as the president and executive of the Innocence Project, right? I was a regular person before I got here, and I hope to stay one.
Our text table audience, let's get you some new donors. And
we at the Innocence Project would love your support. So the Innocence Project is the organization that we're based in New York. Our sole function is to free the staggering number of innocent people who are wrongfully convicted and imprisoned in America's jails and prisons. We not only work to get people free, we do an enormous amount of policy work, meaning, educating legislators, moving bills throughout legislatures and state houses across the country to fix, right? That's the important part, right? We're here not only to get people free, but also to make sure nobody else goes in. And so we do a lot of policy reform work in state houses across the country. We have brought the compensation laws. We have brought the changes in identification procedures, right? That's directly from this office. So we would love your support. We have more cases than we can ever handle. And that is, a testament to how broken the system is, right? Our intake process is insane. And we are constantly just trying to keep up with a number of people who are reaching out to us, and in dire need of our representation. And remember, we're a private, right? We're a private not-for-profit doing this work to get people out, right? Not the government, not a government agency, right? We are a privately funded not-for-profit doing this to get folks out of prison, and we cannot keep up with the demand. So we need all the support we can get. You can go to innocenceproject.org, and I promise it will go, to a wonderful place. We get to see people. I saw a week ago, yesterday, we had a guy named Jathan Kendrick come home in Queens, and he zoomed into one of our all staff meetings. And, he talks about how the night before he had just been out like 3 days, because I woke up at 3 and I just went for a walk because I could, and it's just nothing like it, right? He's like, because I can, right? Because I can. And you just like, yeah, this is worth everything, right? This is why we are here. It was a joy. And it's a joy every time. So, yeah.
That's incredible.
Join us.
Well, we were reflecting on 2020. Obviously, social injustice was a major theme of 2020, and there was no better person to talk to in reflecting on this than you and the work of the Innocence Project. So we know the Texas Table community is gonna, hopefully give you a couple more donations in December. But it was so great to talk to you, Christina.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me. I had such a good time. I hope I get to come back.
You have an open invitation.
Come back.
Yes, for sure. And thank you for the work that you do. And, I just commend you on finding, because clearly this is more than just a job for you. And, the organization, it's sort of like, you're driven by the mission of the organization, but you've been doing that work before you got there. So I commend you on your accomplishments and look forward to seeing all that you will do going forward.
Thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Christina.
Fun having you at the table. Bye. All right, y'all. We are at the end of this episode. We're at the end of 2020. What do you say?
Cheers to that.
Cheers. Absolutely.
2020. I think we just need to thank everybody for supporting us. This is not what we envisioned, but it's been such a highlight of 2020 to connect with you all at the table. So, cheers.
And happy 6-month anniversary to Texas Table.
Ooh, 6 months.
I can't
All
believe
right.
it's been 6 months already. It has flown by, and certainly, for those who don't appreciate it, there's a whole lot of production that goes into each of these episodes.
Yeah. Shout out to our team at Moxie, Janae, Vanessa, the whole crew. We just really thank you all for.
They make us look good.
They make us look good. That's it.
Yeah.
Because we wouldn't do all this.
All right. We'll see you all in 2021. Cheers.
2021. Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers.